Welcome to the Zen Studies Podcast. I'm Domio Burke. Thanks to new supporting members of the podcast, Trevor from Tenino, Washington, and Ruth from Walla Walla, Washington. So remember, you can join me and other Zen folks for live practice in person and online. My community, Brightway Zen, is located in Portland, Oregon, on the west coast of the United States in the Pacific time zone. We do a super job of including you fully in the practice if you join us via what we call the Cloud Zendo or Zoom. Whether we're sitting meditation, chanting, socializing, studying in small groups, or gathering for a class, a talk, or a ceremony. And you can attend whatever parts of the activities you like. You can leave whenever you like. Check us out at brightwayzen.org or follow links on the Zen Studies podcast website. So today, I mentioned in the last episode I was going to do this. I'm trying something new. I have several questions submitted by listeners, and I'm going to respond to them extemporaneously, that is, without preparation. My inclination, of course, is always to want to be really thorough, and most of my episodes are fully written, which is why there's written versions of them available on the Zen Studies podcast website. So I like to be really organized and thorough, and later on I don't want to think, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. But it takes an awful lot, it takes many hours to write those kinds of episodes. And I only have time these days to do maybe 2 of those a month. So I figured my 3rd episode a month could be this kind of answering questions. So we'll see how it goes. So Neil submitted a question which requires a little bit of preamble. So he refers to my episode 273, which I'm talking about the first precept, moral precept, to cultivate and encourage life. The first Buddhist precept. And I said in that episode, quote, at the literal level, at the most basic literal level, this precept means not to take human life. Certainly to do this even indirectly or accidentally has severe karmic consequences on us and others. It's valuable to extend the circle of non-harming beyond human beings, though, because killing any being or thing usually encourages us to disidentify with it and devalue it, seeing our own needs and wants as more important than its continued life. Many Buddhists are vegetarian for this reason, though in Zen we generally regard this as a personal choice. In any case, you are encouraged to be thoughtful about and or grateful to anything you choose to kill. So that's, end quote. That's what I said in episode 273. So Neil writes, episode 273 has made me question the validity of Zen as an enlightened practice. There is a statement in the episode that being vegetarian is a choice in Zen. As far as I can see, the abused and slaughtered sentient beings are not given a choice. Being vegan is an ethical, moral, and environmental imperative. If you believe in the notion of not killing, then you cannot in any way accept the industrialized slaughter of sentient beings to satisfy your own pleasure. This moral and ethical ambiguity leads me to question the whole tradition of Zen. So, to be honest, in a way, I totally agree with you, Neil. To review a little bit of the history of vegetarianism in particular in Buddhism, you know, in original Buddhism, monks were forbidden to kill anything at all, a plant or a bug or anything. So naturally, if they would prefer to be vegetarian. However, they did go on begging rounds and took whatever lay people put into their begging bowls. So if somebody put meat into their begging bowl, they not only could eat it, they were supposed to eat it. It was an offering. So as long as the meat had not been killed for them. So that kept the monks from saying things like, I sure would love a hamburger, and then somebody gives them one, right? So that's kind of an ambiguous situation there. Then we get to China, and a lot of Buddhists in China were and are very strict vegetarians. I don't know about vegan. I don't think so, but it is similarly they make the diet very consistent with that precept. Then you get elsewhere. You get to Japan, and it is not. There is within a temple, within a Zen center, a temple proper. Generally, everything is vegetarian. You don't prepare meat there, but people might go home and have it or go elsewhere and have it. And at least up to this point, we have not gone vegan. That's kind of a more modern understanding of extending this principle of non-harming because of the awareness of the harm that even procuring eggs and dairy and all that do to animals. So that's the kind of ambiguous history. As for now, this is a profound lesson. Not the vegetarian and veganism isn't the only example of this, but this is a profound lesson in dealing with the ideal versus the actual. In many ways, Buddhism and other spiritual paths invite us to imagine the ideal, and then we are unable to fulfill that. Now, I'm sure Neil would argue we are able to be vegan. So, however, technically being able to fulfill something is not necessarily the same as being able to do it in a practical way. For example, if suddenly I required at my Zen center that everyone be vegan, I would lose most of the people at my Zen center. Not just because people disagreed, but because they would find themselves unable to submit to the discipline that required. Now you can judge them for that. You can judge me for that. But it is just kind of what it is. So in general, in Buddhism, we've tried to steer people toward the ideal and not be too wishy-washy about our moral guidelines, and yet not generally put down any red lines or hard and fast requirements that are then going to exclude many people. So that may seem like a really lame explanation, but it's not. It's embracing, or not embracing, but learning to tolerate moral ambiguity is an absolutely essential part of a path to spiritual peace in this world. There's no way we're going to be able to find a world in which everything is perfect. I have a good friend who is an organic farmer, and if you look carefully into your organic food, you're going to find that most of it is grown in soil that incorporates blood or bone meal. There's very few ways of supplementing the soil in this way. Besides, frankly, this is what would naturally be happening, is that there would be animals grazing, living on the soil, and then they would die, and then remains would go back into the soil. So in a way, even in this example of organic farming, it's not entirely vegan, if you will. So those are some of my thoughts on that. I'm sure that I am not going to have satisfied someone who really believes that, like Neil said, being vegan is an ethical, moral, and environmental imperative. But I encourage anyone out there who, struggles with moral issues and is kind of disappointed with Zen or Buddhism or your spiritual path because it officially or practitioners of it don't necessarily completely walk their talk when it comes to their moral ideals. Because, I don't know, if we're too strict about that, we're just going to find ourselves completely isolated and clinging to ideals. So, that brings me to my second question. And this is by, her name is Care. Him or her, actually, I don't know. It could be Care. I apologize for not knowing. But they say, I often hear folks talk about letting thoughts go in meditation, like a cloud going by, etc. But I don't actually know what that means. At my current level of practice, my letting go looks more like using a fly swatter on any thought or emotion that arises. Could you clarify what it means to let a thought go? This is a very good question. And it really points to the fact that in meditation, you get instructions for meditation, and it might seem like now you can learn how to do meditation, and you can do it correctly or incorrectly. But the actual experience of meditation, the actual experience of getting familiar with your own mind and learning how to, even to say kind of use your own mind separates you from your mind. Maybe it's experience your own mind. Maybe even just saying becoming familiar with the experience of having a mind is a long lifetime process. So struggling with questions like this, like what does it mean to let go of a thought, is really where, I don't know, kind of the meat of meditation is, right? This is where we really learn and grow and develop some insight. So yeah, definitely, especially in the kind of meditation that I teach, right? The shikantaza, letting go, just sitting, is we want to absolutely minimize the willful reactivity to thoughts. So I appreciate this person's, saying it feels like they're using a fly swatter on any thought or emotion that arises. Because we all think meditation is supposed to be thought free, and when a thought arises, if we're supposed to let it go, that means it's not supposed to be there, right? There's still, even with the words letting go, there can be a level of judgment about the presence of a thought, so that even letting go is just a slightly veiled attempt to get rid of the thought or emotion that's arising, because we assume we're supposed to be without it. So this really requires a careful introspection and observation of the step-by-step process of the arising of a thought, our attitude toward that thought, the feelings and emotions, willful ideas that arise in connection with it. When I am going to let go of a thought versus, try to get rid of a thought, it really helps me to first acknowledge the thought. I think Charlotte Choco Beck actually had a process where she would instruct people to label the thought. I don't necessarily go that far because it's very easy to get pulled into the thought and just start thinking. But acknowledging the thought or emotion in some way. So, for instance, I realize that I'm planting my garden, and so I can just in that moment take a breath and, I was just planting the garden. And then nothing, essentially. Then we hold still because having recognized the thought, it's already taken care of. I like to think of it as we get lost in a dream of thought that is clearly not what we're looking for in Zazen or any kind of meditation. We get lost in the dream of thought. Then we wake up from the dream of thought and we realize we were just caught up. We were just thinking about something. We were just daydreaming, whatever. We have already woken up. So nothing more needs to be done. If we wake up from that dream of thought and immediately conceive of an I who is directing our meditation and who now needs to take control of the situation and now needs to make sure another thought doesn't arise, it's just more stuff. It's just more activity and duality. We've awakened from the dream of thought. And what's fascinating is if you don't do anything, it's like your awareness expands and you recall your aspiration to sit. You recall your aspiration to, at least for the time being, not worry about such and such a thing. So if I just kind of become aware, I was just planting my garden, and I don't have to judge that thought or get rid of that thought. Matter of fact, if I do, I'm just going to cause more agitation. I can just let it be. And if once I've woken up from the dream of thought, it often just goes away on its own, kind of peters out without me giving more energy and attention. Once my awareness has expanded to remember, oh yeah, I'm sitting meditation. I don't need to be planting my garden right now. I'm just actually probably just trying to amuse myself and avoid silence by planting my garden. I'm probably not even going to do all this stuff that I imagine. I actually willingly let go of the thought. So Uchiyama Roshi calls it opening the hand of thought. So we can think of it as when we get caught up in a thought or emotion, we've actually grabbed it. So there's actually something we are doing to keep that present and alive. So we just stop doing that. So we don't do anything. Letting go isn't like kind of tossing away. It's just opening that hand of thought so that the thought can go away if it's going to go away. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. So hopefully that's a little helpful in terms of what is meant by letting go of a thought. All right, one more. This is from Micah. They say, is taking action not always the result of being dissatisfied in some way? You mentioned taking action in certain circumstances when one knows what to do. But if someone has discovered their true nature and has found some type of cosmic satisfaction, what would be a circumstance in which this person or Buddha takes action? given that this person is not wishing for things to be another way? Well, this is a great question for the ages. This is really a question about the nature of bodhisattva activity, right? I mean, original Buddhism is like, hey, if I awaken fully, I'm going off into nirvana. I mean, I might stick around for the rest of my life and teach other people Buddhism, but then I'm out of here. Whereas the ideal of the bodhisattva is we stick around lifetime after lifetime, whether you believe that literally or it's just figuratively, we stick around to benefit other beings. But why? Why, if we see that everything is, like I said in my episode on suchness, everything is precious just as it is, viewed along the independent dimension, everything is one seamless reality, viewed free from any expectation, from any filter of self-interest, from any sense of that it should be another way. It just is what it is. I guess when I reflect like that and I feel some of that peace and solace and groundedness from that kind of insight, it is about the state of this moment, but it is not about what happens the next moment. So just because everything is precious just as it is, doesn't mean that I do not take action to, make something more just, to relieve some suffering. It becomes something that is what it feels spiritually and emotionally optional. And that sounds like it could be really terrible, right? That it's optional that I respond to the suffering of other beings, but that makes it sound like I don't care. So this is subtle. It is possible to take passionate action, to even risk your own life and comfort and safety, to take a passionate action on behalf of beings or life or justice or anything, without losing the sense that actually everything is precious just as it is. This is it doesn't make sense intellectually, but it does make sense experientially. This reminds me of a story that one of my teachers, Jan Chozen Bays, told at a retreat. She said she had a dream where she had died and gone to heaven, and her husband, in the dream, not in real life, but her husband had died before her and was in heaven and was showing her around and showing her where people went to eat and, where people could do this or that. And then they passed a rundown old barn, and Chosen said she was surprised to see something kind of in disrepair, and she asked, well, shouldn't someone be fixing that, taking care of that? Why is that broken down in heaven? And her husband said, it's optional. So if you think about all of the ways that we can benefit beings, and we can relieve suffering, even just, in the sphere of our own lives, we do it because I don't know. We do it because it's beautiful. We don't do it because we're hoping to end all suffering ever in the history of mankind, right? If we fight to save a beautiful grove of woods from destruction, we're saving that grove. We're not necessarily ending all exploitation of nature. It's a very immediate and grounded response to beings' needs. And yeah, I guess that's probably enough to say on that for now. It's not like I'm going to be able to sum up the entire koan in one answer. So I will leave it there. So I will be back fairly soon with a full written episode. I hope you'll tune in. Thanks for listening.